Hey guys, I got some notes here because we're about to go over some important stuff. So grab your notebook too. We are about to go over some important stuff about conversations. And I'm going to call this little series of mine Sin's Conversation Series because we're not going to be able to get it all today in just one video. So let's go with why conversations are important. Why must we have important conversations? So conversations are words. Words are vibrations. Vibrations is what the world responds to around us. So we create and we manifest with our words in our conversations. Our words are important. Words are manifestation tools. So we create what we want in the world through our words, through our conversations. And having the ability to have important conversations is a game changer. So that's what we're going to learn. That's what we're going to get into, is how these important conversations is going to be a game changer for us, because we will have the confidence walking into the conversation first, knowing that everything is okay and we are okay and we are in control of ourselves and our emotions, and we know the right words to say and the right words not to say, because important conversations, they are real. So in the book that I was reading, because all of this great information came from a book. And I'm learning with you guys. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, is so that we can learn together. And I can keep this great information right in my forefront of my mind because it's important information. All right. So the book that I read and am still reading and studying from is How to Build Meaningful Relationships Through Conversations by Carol Ann Lloyd. And we're going to get right into what Carol Ann Lloyd says about making conversations real. So real, REAL, stands for relevant, effective, affirming, and legitimate. So getting into the R part of real is relevant. So having conversations that matter. Can we think about times when we started to have a conversation about things that didn't matter? And it may have caused us some extra frustration? Yep, I have too. So we need to be more smarter about if this conversation is relevant and does it matter. Is it going to benefit my life? Is it going to benefit the other person's life? Like, how does this information that's going to be communicated between us, how is that going to be helpful? Is it relevant? So, is it worth your time? Answer that one seriously. Okay. Next one is effective. So how to make a conversation real is make it effective. So have a conversation that accomplishes something important. Have a goal behind our conversations. We can just jump right into a conversation when our emotions are full steam without a clear goal in mind, except for to release a feeling. So we need to step back once we're feeling our feelings and let them process a little bit. And if that means removing yourself from the situation, then that's okay. But I've come to realize, stemming deep within my childhood, that I have never really been able to handle anger correctly. And that has came into my adulthood. So there's a lot of adult babies running around who don't know how to handle their emotions and talk about their emotions without being emotional. That's me. So, I'm not calling you out because I totally am doing that. So that's something we're going to learn about and something that we're going to overcome, hopefully. I just had my finger down there almost the whole time, so I really apologize if I affected with the sound at all. I hope not. Okay. The next way to make a conversation real is affirming. So conversations that respect everyone involved. We're not going to have a conversation just to belittle somebody. That's not right. We're not going to have a conversation just to make our way or whatever, like to push our motives onto other people. That's not right. So we need to respect everybody involved. Everybody has feelings and emotions and opinions, and that's okay. And we need to listen a little bit better. We'll get into listening in another video because that's a whole separate conversation in itself. Listening. So, affirming. So conversations that respects everybody involved. And the last way to make a conversation real is to be legitimate. So conversations that are important and that matter. And if they are important to you and if they matter to you, then they are worth having a conversation about. So real conversations have a cost. And that cost is usually vulnerability. I know. I said it. Vulnerability. Right? Gag me. So, vulnerability. We need a little bit be more open about that. I need to be a little bit more open about that. I need to be able to be more comfortable in my vulnerability. Trying so hard. Okay. It's called breathing into it and surrendering. Okay. So, vulnerability, taking a chance on misunderstandings, taking a chance on being misunderstood, taking a chance on miscommunication. If the conversation is really that important, then we need to make sure that we can take a chance on how, on taking a chance on misunderstandings. Okay. Next is, but the greater cost of not having a conversation, there's a greater cost to not having a conversation, is actually how I should say that. And one of them is that this can result in a loss of trust between the people. This can result in a loss of opportunities. This can result in a long-lasting damage to the relationship. So not having those kind of conversations can do more harm than good. So we need to make sure that we are doing a few things before these real conversations have to happen. So real conversations include others, the needs and goals and interests of others. So whenever we're having a real conversation with somebody else, we need to include that other person. So that we're going to get into that a little bit later on listening and including the other person into the conversation, because we are talking because we have a goal in mind and we need to communicate that goal and come to an understanding about that goal. But there's another person involved, so we need to create space for them also. Conversations include times of silence. So these real conversations that we're having, the time to process the information that we're giving each other, this often includes times of silence and times of processing, times of just integrating the information and making sure that we're all on the same page. So this only happens whenever people are not talking, which is hard for me because I'm a Gemini, and whenever there's silence in the air, I tend to be a little uncomfortable. So I need to get a little bit more comfortable with the times of silence and be patient. So having important conversations that matter take effort. They take our energy. If it's important to us, it needs to be done. So, things that we need to know. Which conversations we need to have and when we need to have them. So there's obviously in conversations that are inappropriate times. So we just need to be mindful of when we are bringing up stuff. Is it an appropriate time to bring up stuff? Is it going to harm the other person or harm us in any way or anything like that? So we need to make sure that we're having the right conversations at the right times. We also need to get the conversation off on the right start. So a lot of times you hear like first impression really means a lot. Like you only get one chance at first impressions. Well, that's true in conversations too. So if you don't start your conversation off at the very jump start of it with a way that you need to get it started off in a positive manner, in a resolving manner, or whatever you need to accomplish in your goal, then if you don't start off with that, then it's not going to present itself later on in the conversation. You might lose the tone of the conversation that you want to have. We need to know where we want to end up, so the end goal in mind. We need to know what our goal is for the conversation. We need to establish a criteria for when and how to give high stakes conversations. That was a little bit what I was talking about before, but high stakes conversations is like a little bit more important stuff. When there's material or emotional or whatever kind of things at stake, that's whenever we just need to establish a criteria for that before we actually have those conversations. So a couple of the criterias that we need to set for having a conversation. We need to set the stage to be successful. So there are 3 steps to setting the stage to a conversation. So the first step is to decide which conversation to have. So that means not jumping around subject to subject within a conversation. That means not bringing up past issues that may have already have been talked about or resolved or not resolved, or that needs to just be in its own conversation. We need to stick to what we're talking about and not tend to go off subject. So whenever we start the conversation off right by setting the stage and we put out there what our goal is, what we want out of this conversation, and then we decide which conversation to have based off of our goal. So we're not going to have a conversation about, I don't even know, I can't even think of an example right now. I don't even want to bring up an example right now. So we're just going to move on to step 2. So step 2 to having a great conversation and setting the stage for a great conversation is get things off to a great start. So starting it off with a little bit more, we'll get into that. So step 2 is getting things off to a great start. And step 3, if you're writing this down, keep up with me. Step 3 is know where you want to end up and have a plan on how to get there. So have your goal in mind, but then we also need to set a plan involved and how we're going to get there. So conversations, they take effort. We're going to get through this. All right. So we're going to go back to step 1 of setting the stage. We're going to get a little bit more deeper into that because I have a couple bullet points to that, each one of these stages. So, and number 1 is deciding which conversation to have. So, is every conversation important? Is it worth having? So pick your battles wisely and participate in the conversations that you choose to participate in. Choose which ones you have and which ones that you just don't even need to worry about today or tomorrow or ever. So, is this a couple questions that we need to ask ourselves whenever we are dealing with step one in how to have important conversations? A couple of the questions that we need to ask ourselves is this conversation going to move us forward? So, no matter what, we're not trying to go backwards. So, is this conversation that we're about to have, is it going to move us forward? Hopefully forward into abundance. So, all right. Is this conversation necessary for the well-being of everyone involved? So, is this conversation going to be harmful to somebody? Is it like their well-being? Is their well-being going to be jeopardized because of a conversation that we're about to have? Is the conversation important to my work or personal development? So that would mean like, is the conversation geared towards, let's say, like a raise at work or something like that? So if it is important to your personal development and your work, then I would say yes, it is an important conversation to have. Two more. The next one is this conversation a reaction to an emotion or have no other goals? I do this one sometimes. So, a reaction to emotion. So, is this conversation nothing but a reaction to an emotion? Guilty. If you answer yes to that one, then we're just not going to have that conversation. Okay. Last one is this conversation an opportunity? So, an opportunity for you, an opportunity for them, an opportunity for whatever. So, is this conversation going to create an opportunity? And if it is, then have that conversation. All right, I'm going to turn the page. We've got a lot of notes to go over because we're only in step 2. Oh, no, wait. Before we move on to step 2, we are going to go through when not to have a conversation, 4 bullet points on when not to have a conversation, and then we're also going to go through another 4 bullet points on when to have a conversation. So, when not to have a conversation is when you are hurt and when you want to hurt back. And then you don't want to have that conversation at that moment in time. You're going to have to relax and forgive so that the hurt can be a little bit lessened before you can come together and come to an agreement and an understanding in a conversation that's actually going to go somewhere. All right, so when not to have a conversation is when someone challenges you or when someone is making demands on you that is making you feel uncomfortable with it all. You can choose not to have that conversation. You can also choose not to have a conversation when the conversation will make things worse for any reason. We don't want to have that conversation. And we also don't want to have a conversation when emotions are so high that you can't even have a conversation without them taking over. I'll raise my hand to that one too. Yeah. So, on a side note, I just read a paper for my college studies, and it was all about conflict in the workplace. And this study was about how forgiveness is one of the main things that they use for workplace conflict. Yeah. So we might get into that a little bit later. Okay, so we're going to go over when to have a conversation. So we definitely want to have these conversations when it will make a difference in my level of understanding. So if I'm unaware, or you know what I mean, like it's up to me to make myself knowledgeable. It's up to me to make sure that I am not have the knowledge that I need. So I need to have that conversation to make sure that I have a different level of understanding. So I also need to have a conversation when it can resolve problems, even if I don't even like see the solutions at first. But there's obviously a problem, and we're gonna have to talk it out. So if there's a problem, then we might have to have that conversation. But we want to go back up to when not to have the conversation, because if it's gonna hurt somebody, or make demands on somebody or anything like that, then we don't want to have that conversation. So, but if it resolve problems, then we want to have that conversation. So we also want to have a conversation when it allows us to express certain things that matter to us, and it will make a difference to others. So if it matters to us, then we need to have that conversation. And then the last thing is when we need to have a conversation is when it allows us to ask for necessary change. So like that raise, we're gonna go ask our boss for. So a necessary change that has to happen. We need to have that conversation. So that's step 1 to setting the stage. We're going to go into step 2 of setting the stage, which, you guys got your notes? Do you remember what that was? It is getting off to a great start. I had to look at my notes. All right, so getting off to a great start. So once we decide to have that conversation, what is the best way to get started? So first impressions mean so much. And as we set the tone right from the start, it is easier for us to drive the conversation back if it happens to get off track. So that's a positive thing about setting the tone first. And then we also want to ask ourselves, why are we having this conversation? What do we want to accomplish? And we often want to ask ourselves questions like, at the end of this conversation, I want, and then fill in the blank. So that's something that we need to think about in step 2. What do I want to be different at the end of the conversation? Also in step 2. We still have 3 more bullet points in step 2. I apologize. So start with love and clear intentions is a good way to start the conversation, get things off to a right start. So make sure that the person you are talking to understands that you're not going to have this conversation to attack them, not to put them in a defensive mode, and to start off from a love point of view, like general concern for them, or yourself, or the conversation, or whatever matters. You just general concern and love and clear intentions. Next bullet point is getting off to the right start reinforces the relationship and it builds trust between you guys. So having these important conversations in the long run is going to be better for the relationship and the trust, building the trust between you guys. And starting from a positive place is better than starting from a place of frustration. Because you get more flies with honey than vinegar? Yeah. So, moving on to step 3 is step 3 to setting the stage is identify the destination and a way to get there. So we can't, we want to think about this like a road trip. We want to think about this conversation like a vacation that we're about to take. And we have a destination in mind. That's great. And we, first we need to decide that we're taking a trip, step 1. Then we need to pick our great destination. Then we need to map out our way. because we have different kind of ways to go. We can go exploring over here. We can go to all different kind of touristy things. So it really depends, like the quickest way to get there versus if we want to go see something else. So map out your way on how to get there, because we don't just get in the car and just go. You know what I mean? We don't just start a conversation off with full-blown emotions and it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be a positive experience for anybody, and it may, if it continuously happens over and over and over and over again, it will cause a traumatic response in each other every time that you want to have a conversation. So, conversations, they're important, and speaking to each other in the correct tone, in the correct way is important. Setting the stage on our conversations and putting groundwork in to our conversations is important. Making sure that we respect each other in the conversations is important. And even if the respect is only one way, that's okay, because you are showing the other person how to have a correct conversation. And the reason why we have to turn on a YouTube channel or read a book about conversations is because we didn't learn that whenever we were growing up on how to have those important conversations. Or maybe didn't even learn how to control our emotions, or didn't learn how to communicate our emotions properly. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that can affect conversations and the way conversations go down. So we just want to make sure that we are starting off on the most positive foot that we can start off with. And then we're going to get a little bit more deep into the book about listening to each other, creating that silent space and holding space for each other, having compassion for each other, feeling empathy for each other, and getting to our goal of this great conversation. So yeah, the next video is going to be coming up probably next weekend. So maybe sooner. I'm not really sure. Don't really have a plan to this. I just want to jump on and learn with you guys and go over this knowledge that I've written down over and over again so that it can really seep into my brain and become a permanent part of my life and a permanent part of my conversations. Because conversations are important. Conversations matter. Conversations are key to manifestations in your life. So, all that goodness and stuff. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.